It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millzy back with another episode of Millzy Brews here on Hometown Commander, baby. The show where, per usual arrangement, you join me in brewing a deck. Today, we're going to do the only commander from Unfinity that I have any want in general to try to brew. I'm sorry, guys. I'm a long-term, commander EDH player. And there really, honestly, isn't much from Unfinity that really interests me outside of a couple rares. But I'd be amiss to not have some fun brewing something that's different. I've got one or two more things coming out from 40K. We're not quite done with that set yet. But Unfinity is just an interesting enigma. And I don't want to give up. I don't want to give up on Unfinity. I think there's going to be some good... there's going to be some good value in the set. So let's talk about Myra the Magnificent, our kind of face character, if you think about it. The world that Unfinity is set in, the kind of carnival theme park spacey thing, is Myra's actual place. So she's kind of our Walt Disney, so to speak, of the park. Let's go over a card. We'll talk about how we want to do this, what we're going to try to do. Let's have some fun. 2 blue-red for a human performer. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, we're going to open up an attraction. We'll go over attractions in a second. If you have yet to see any Unfinity spoilers, get ready for that one. X and tap, exile instant or sorcery card with mana value X from your graveyard, and choose an attraction you control that doesn't have a midway counter on it. Put a midway counter on it. Whenever you visit that attraction, copy that spell. You can cast the copied spell without paying its mana cost. All right, so for those of you that don't know, or for those of you that literally have yet to see an attraction, let's talk about it. I doubt these will see much play outside of the few cards that tell us that we can open up an attraction, but what I'll really do is talk about what attractions are, how they work, how we can do them, what we can do with them, and we'll get into how we're going to build this deck. So we have Balloon Stand in front of us. There's no cost for Balloon Stand. We cannot play it from our hand. How attractions work are you start the game with an attraction deck. For a constructed format like Commander, we have to have a minimum of 10, but there are 19 legal, or I believe it's 19 or 20 eternal legal attractions. We know that because in Unfinity, there's a little acorn stamp on the ones that aren't legal, but these ones are legal. So let's go over the important things on Balloon Stand and other attractions. You'll note we have a text box, just like we have on every other card. But over on the right-hand side, you're going to see we have 1 through 6 listed on the side. And in this case, certain ones of these numbers are going to be lit up. How that works is at the start of our main phase, if we have, at the same time we would resolve putting counters on sagas or anything like that, we're going to roll a d6. Whatever the result is, we're going to look at all the attractions we have available to us. And if our result coordinates to any of our attractions, now note that all attractions will activate on 6. All of the other attractions will give us our choice. We'll talk about any strategy there in there. If we roll the correct number, or we roll it, no matter how many of them, so if we roll 6, we would activate all of our attractions. But if we roll any other number, we would visit every attraction that results with that number. So, for Balloon Stand, it says visit. Choose one. We either make a 1/1 balloon creature when flying, or we sacrifice a balloon. The target creature gets flying to let it turn. And you'll see that the different numbers are lit up. Now, for example, for each of these different attractions, they're all going to have different numbers. You see here on something like Drop Tower. Drop Tower has 3 different numbers lit up. So, and you're gonna be able to choose. Each of these has different versions. Of course, just like the Commander rules, we can only play one version of any one of these attractions. We just get our choice. Okay, so Myra lets us open up attractions by playing spells, and we visit the attractions by rolling dice. So I think the best way to go about playing Myra, pardon me, got a quick drink there, is going to be to go into dice rolling and go into spell slinging. At the end of the day, we need to end the game. And her second ability seems really cool. If we want to go in the extra turns route, we can go in the damage route. We can use things like Jessica's Will and and our rituals like that to get a bunch of mana. There's a bunch of things we can do with this, but what I really want to do first is talk about the dice rolling side of this. So we have access to dice rolling here because we're going to roll a dice at the start of our main phase, okay? And I think we can take our payoffs for dice rolling and bring them really in handy. So what I went ahead and did here was, surprisingly, Myra has an EDH rec page, and we'll get into that in a second. I'm going to try to switch up these deck building videos. Some of them I'm going to build right off EDH rec. Some of them I'm going to try to put my own ideas in. Hope that you guys appreciate that I'm not just building right off EDH rec. I'm trying to kind of think about this here. Okay, so unfortunately we're only rolling d6s, but that doesn't mean that we can't play into dice rolling at all. So for example, I think a creature like Will could be very good for our deck. Whenever we roll one or more dice, instead we roll that many dice plus one, ignore the lowest roll, and then whenever we roll one or more dice, we put counter on them. Okay, so this is a creature that benefits from the other thing that we're trying to do. We have things like Barbarian class, which does the same thing. What I like about Barbarian class, though, is on level 2, we start giving our creatures menace. So that's really good. Vexing Puzzle Box, whenever we roll dice, put numbers, put a number of charge counters on it until we get the result. We can tap it to add mana and roll a d20. So we're starting to get down. You see, we're starting to kind of look at these dice rolling cards. I really like something like Pixie Guide, which is going to allow us to roll dice and ignore the lowest roll. We have Faraday, which gets flying and menace when we roll dice, which I think looks really cool. We have the interesting thing of something like Feywild Trickster, which says whenever we roll one more dice, we get a token, which doesn't seem too bad either. Bamboozling Beeble says 1 and tap. The next time target player would roll one or more dice, instead they roll that many dice plus 1, and you choose one of those rolls to ignore. Seems kind of interesting. That could be an interesting little piece there. It has protection from robots, which is not going to make that much of a difference because we're not all that worried about robots, considering they're only in Unfinity. But we have Celebrate 1000. We'll deal with that later. Right now, I'm looking mainly at rolling dice. Here we got Videk and Squirrel Whacker. As it enters the battlefield, roll 6-sided dice twice. Its base power and toughness becomes the first result, and its base toughness becomes the second result. Okay, maybe you roll one or more 6-sided die. Instead, roll them, and you may exchange one result with its base power, base toughness. That seems kind of interesting. Maybe we can play around with that. Okay, so what I'm noticing right away is we're not pulling up any of the D20 cards, which is okay. We're going to go ahead and change our Scryfall search there. But I think I'm kind of already seeing what our goal is going to be here. Half dice rolling, half spells. So I think we're just going to go ahead and start adding in our dice rolling stuff, because at the end of the day, I think the dice rolling is going to help us make sure we always get into our... I think they're going to make sure that we always get into our attractions. So I think what we'll want to do in our attractions is, when we have the choice, since since a lot of these dice rolling cards want us to pick the results with the highest result, what we'll want to do is try to make all of our attractions activate on maybe 4, 5, or 6 if possible. That will allow us to always take the highest roll and make sure that we always get access. I think that seems kind of interesting, right? And it could do us a lot of good. We'll use Willblade of Frontiers. We use the Vexing Puzzle Box. So what I think I want to do here is we're going to flesh out a little bit of the... We're going to flesh out a little bit of the dice rolling. Then we're going to flesh out a little bit of the spells. And then we're going to marry it back together. I'm very interested actually to show this list when I'm done to Mikey. Mikey has been looking for a dice rolling deck for a little bit, and I know that he's gotten a little salty at times because he hasn't been able to find the deck he exactly wants. My hope is maybe, just maybe, that this deck will make him feel good. This is definitely something that I find interesting. This is not the normal type of deck that I would choose for myself, but I think that's what makes deck building so much fun, is when we get to try ideas and strategies that we wouldn't normally play. In fact, some of the best decks that I've ever built were decks that I built in a way that I didn't necessarily expect. What I like with this dice roll payoff is that Vexing Puzzle Box seems really a lot better. It's a mana rock that's going to allow us to go get artifacts, and we can kind of look into what artifacts we want later. The cool part about all of these attractions are they are artifacts. So we can play into a little bit of sub-artifact theme in a second. But what I want to do is I want to look at all of our other D20 cards or our other rolling dice cards. And then maybe we can find a way to have some fun here. So I love Delina. I think Delina is going to be a really important card in this deck. Whenever she attacks, we choose a creature and roll a d20. And if it's 15 through 20, we recreate one of those tokens, and then we roll again, and hopefully we can almost go infinite. Delina with Pixie Guide is actually a really cool combination because it allows you to almost always make an absolute ton of triggers. I think Will does the same thing, and so does Barbarian Class. So Delina has a lot of payoffs with that. And I think it's going to add kind of another dimension to our deck as opposed to just spells and attractions. I kind of want to still find a way to have another way to win instead of just what I'm guessing is turns ending. You know, I want to find some way else we can win. I like the dragons. My only worry about the dragons is they're going to be too expensive. At the end of the day, we are playing a spells deck. But I could see Copper Dragon fitting because those all we needed to do is hit once, and those treasures will absolutely change our game plan. I like Wand of Wonder. Wand of Wonder could definitely be interesting. Allows us to kind of steal our opponent's spells. It seems like a really good idea. I kind of am intrigued at the idea of Component Pouch. It's kind of a mana rock of sorts that rolls dice. I think that kind of fits what we're trying to do. I love the idea of Wizard Spellbook. I just worry we'll never actually hit the amount of mana necessary to actually hit it, but it's a card that I would love to actually play. We're going to take things out of graveyards, roll dice, cast the cards, and hopefully we can get into this kind of spell slinging, nightmare. Will's Reversal seems really good. It's a kind of counterspell and redirect altogether, which I think is really good. Same thing with Gale's Redirection. It kind of plays the same thing. Not sure if we're exactly going to do it for sure, but I think could be interesting. Same thing with so that copies. Will's Reversal is copies. I apologize. Gale's Redirection is the one that can potentially counter or exile it, and then we get to cast it. Berserker's Frenzy, kind of like an Odric type effect, where we can, if we get a 15 through 20, we can choose how creatures block. I think that seems interesting for sure. I like the idea of Diviner's Portent, but we have a lot of other better draw spells that we can use. Cone of Cold seems kind of interesting to tap all our opponent's creatures down. All right, so we've got D20. Let's try D10. Let's see if there's any D10 cards. I remember that the D20 is not the only dice we can roll. Oh, that's right. It's D8 and then D6 and then maybe even D4. So let's go down the list. Again, we're trying to dice roll. Arcane Endeavor and Clay Golem. That's okay. We'll move down to D6. It could also say six-sided die. So what we'll do is we'll do this, and then we'll look at six-sided die. Every channel player casts a non-creature spell, roll a d6. It deals damage equal to resolve. So Maddening Hex could be interesting. Let's try d4, and then we'll search for six-sided dice, because I bet you some of those older cards are going to say six-sided die. Again, I think I see this deck playing more into the spell slinging than I do into the that puzzle word's going to come into handy once we start. See if there's a hyphen or not. Okay. Okay. So we see Boing. We see that again. Cannot play a lot of these illegal cards, so we're going to roll right through them. Okay, so it looks like we've gotten through most of our dice rolling cards. So let's add the cards we have here. So just recently, I finished up my latest. It was a deck I built not Bronze Dragon, Copper Dragon. It's a deck I built a long time ago, and I put Myra in Galazeth, a dragon that cares about tapping your artifacts for mana for the purpose of playing spells. And I think that if we want to just go a little bit into treasures, I feel like Galazeth could come into a lot of handy here as a little bit of a support structure type thing. There's plenty of ways to make treasures, especially that will let us draw anyway, which can be really important. So maybe we consider that. Galazeth has, at minimum, will let all of our attractions tap for mana, which honestly could end up being something that we need to keep in the back of our mind, because they don't have any abilities when they're on the battlefield other than their ability once per turn to go off, right? So I actually think something like Galazeth could be a cool tech in this deck to allow us to do that. So it says artifacts you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana and only cast an instant or sorcery. So like I said, personally, I'm trying Myra out in this deck because I think all these attractions add a ton of value. But here, I think Galazeth is just a perfect piece of support. So that's kind of cool. So let's go through the spells. Let's go through some spells. What are the general spells we want to play? We're in blue, so we need our draw package. We're going to play things like Brainstorm. We're going to play things like Ponder. I think we're going to play things like Preordain. I'm a giant fan of Faithless Looting. Some other people aren't, but I think Faithless Looting does a very good job, especially when you're really searching for the good stuff. I don't mind the idea of playing into Galazeth with something like a big score or Unexpected Windfall. The thing I like about these two spells are they're things that we can put onto an attraction with Myra and get over and over and over again. We of course want to play things like Jeska's Will, which will end up producing us mana. Let's think. We want to put in some of our classics like Cyclonic Rift. We need removal, so maybe something like Reality Shift, a spell that exiles a creature. Just exiles target creature. I kind of like adding like Pongify and Rapid Hybridization in here. Those seem like really fun spells to put onto an attraction and be able to copy over and over again. Okay, so that's kind of where I'm at the moment. I'm sure there's a whole lot of other spells that are going to come to mind, but let's move into the spell slinging side. So let's move into some of our payoffs for spell slinging. I'm thinking maybe Gutter Snipe. We have maybe something like Young Pyromancer, Poppet Stitcher. So what I'm trying to do is think of cards that are going to pay us off and give us creature tokens for casting spells. I'm trying to think, what else do we have? We have Goblin Electromancer, but I wonder how often Goblin Electromancer is actually going to net us a bunch of benefit. Do we want something like Smothering Egg or Smoldering Egg? Is that what it is? Am I remembering the name of it wrong? Which is more than possible. Let's go into the big search. On the front side, it stays not flipped until you have a certain CMC, and then once that's what it is. It's Smoldering Egg. Stays that until you have a certain amount of CMC, and then when it flips, it deals 2 damage to any target when you cast an instant or sorcery. Okay. One of my favorite cards for this type of strategy, if we're going to go spell slinging, is something like Saheeli. Whether we go Sublime Artificer or we go Saheeli the Gifted, but this goes every time we cast a spell. I think one of the Rawls might be kind of cool, which will help us target or copy some spells. So let's see. Sorry, guys, I'm getting used to Architect, but this is my excuse for using this. Whatever deck builder you guys like, please use whatever you like. I'm just trying to get used to another one. I use Moxfield more often than anything else, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong. And in fact, I like Architect for some things, but I think the role I want is Storm Conduit. Whenever you cast or copy a sorcery spell, do that, and then -2 can copy. Are any of the other ones better? I don't think so. Well, I think one of our other great spell payoffs is Stormkiln Artist, which is going to make us treasures whenever we cast or copy a spell. Okay, so I think we're hitting a nice critical mass here of cards. Let's really quick go into lands. What I'm kind of interested here is going to see what EDH Rec has for Myra. I'm sure there's going to be some things that I am absolutely missing, but I'm very intrigued to see what it has for me. What are the cards that I'm missing? Like I said, I have ideas, I have spells off the top of my head, but I'm kind of intrigued to see what people have come up with on EDH Rec as well. I have, I could probably fill this out with, borrowing from my Kess list that I have, or Galazeth, spells from those two decks. But I would be honestly very intrigued at what we see out of some other spells, and I have a feeling that what it's also going to do is just remind me of spells that I've forgotten about. It's easy to forget about things when you're just running through in your head trying to brew. So I'll always suggest that you, try to do your best if you want to think about some cards on your own. But then, it doesn't hurt to go look at deck building resources as well to see if it kind of jogs your mind, to be honest, on any... Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. We'll just add a bunch of these for now. We'll come back through for the lands. I'm sure there's more dual lands I can think of off the top of my head. We'll add like Reliquary Tower. I think a lot of my plan here is to add some fun stuff on the back. See whether people are playing. Add some fun stuff on the back end to really make this deck a ton of fun. So we're just gonna add a bunch of basic lands for now, and as we add other lands, we can come back. Let's add our mana rocks really quick. Soul Ring, Arcane Signet. We'll add our Talisman. The cool part about the Talismans and the Signets is most of them just got reprinted, whether in 40K or in Secret Lairs. So the cool part is we hopefully your Talisman of choice, at least for this deck, Talisman of Creativity has been reprinted a couple times, so it shouldn't be too bad. If you're playing in some other 2-color combinations like blue-white, for example, those are still a little bit pricey. Kind of think I like Primal Amulet here, an artifact that when it flips over, we can pay a mana and then copy the spell that we cast, which seems kind of good. It's going to be hard to turn down the option of trying a spell slinging sub theme, or a treasure sub theme, since we're in blue red. So I'm going to add things like Storm the Vault. I'm going to add a card like Reign of Riches, which gets us treasures, and then the first time we cast a spell each turn that has mana spent from treasures, that has Cascade. And then I really love Arcane Bombardment. I think it's one of those cards that just can really win games if it takes off, casting stuff like Jessica's Will and things like that. So we're going to throw that in there. And then I think most Izzet decks love ending with a card like Thousand Year Storm. It says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it for each other instant or sorcery spell you've cast before it this turn. You may choose new targets for the copy. This is going to also help us end the game. And then last couple things before we go over, I want to add in something like Crackle with Power. It's a big red spell that's going to help us deal damage if we have enough mana. And then I want to add like, let's add like Curse of the Swine. And maybe something like Mass Manipulation. I'm just trying to think of these blue spells that can have some fun utility, help wipe the board. You know, Cyclonic Rift does a little bit of that as well, but I'm just trying to think of some fun random spells before we go take a look at something like EDH Rec to help me kind of point this a little bit in. I like the little bit of I like a little bit of that. I'm gonna try Magnus the Red from 40k, reducing our spells for each token we control. I would like to go heavy into the tokens if we can. It says creature tokens. So we have a couple different ways we can do that. Okay, so I like this base for now. What we're going to do is we're going to come over to EDH Rec, and like I advise you to do anytime you build a deck, you want to look through EDH Rec as a source of kind of refining down what you're putting in your deck. Don't just copy and paste. Just because a card's on EDH Rec doesn't... Normally it means that it's probably good in your deck, but don't just let that be a reason to auto copy the card and say this needs to be in my deck. What we want to do is look at the cards that are on there and why will they fit our strategy. We know we're trying to do dice rolling and spell slinging, and like I said, I'm going to do with a small treasure sub theme here for Galazeth, and that's just because I've had good success with that deck, and I think it'll work well as a mini commander, kind of like Faraday and Delina do. They work well as these little cards that are going to do well for us. So, all right, let's move over to Myra's page. Let's see, how many decks do we have? 10 decks. Interesting. 10 decks already with... Oh, no. 10 decks already with Myra. I just realized that the stand that my mic is on is clamped incorrectly, so I'll have to fix that up. So I'm going to try not to play around with this anymore. I just want to show you really quickly. This is something that I figured out a few weeks ago and will be good here when you're looking at commanders that aren't Myra and have 10 decks. But if you click this mock, let's say I'm on Architect, right? So let's click Architect right here. This is going to bring up all the other Myra decks that exist. Very interesting. We have a lot of Myra decks on Architect, 64 of them. So maybe this hasn't uploaded yet. Let's click Moxfield. Let's see how many are on Moxfield. Moxfield has a few. So just so you can see there, those will give you options to go look at. And same thing around MTG Goldfish, although they don't have any. And then Aether Hub should do the same thing. So because Myra's still pretty new, we don't have access to as much of that, yet. But if you go look at an older commander, they will be there. What I might do is take a look at one or two of these as well and try to get some ideas. Since Myra's so new, and by that I mean when I go to test the deck or when I go to play the deck on my own, I might go compare to some other people's things. But I expect to see a lot of spell slinging, stormy type decks. So let's see. Monitor. When it enters the battlefield, open an attraction. Once per turn, you may pay 1 to reroll one or more dice you've rolled. That seems kind of good. It comes in and gets us the attraction. And then it allows us to pay 1 to reroll a dice, which could ensure that we get into more of our attractions. Command performance looks really good. I don't really want to play around with the stickers, but being able to just open up more attractions or reroll to visit your attractions. Now, my assumption of what that means is that I get to reroll again to visit all of my attractions again. And if that's the case, then that is great. So I really like that card. We see Will, we see that, and we see the Beeble. Okay. Well, let's keep going. We see Barbarian class. We see Veyron. Veyron actually seems like a good idea. And the main reason there is because when we're putting those midway counters on our attractions and we're copying those spells, something like Veyron will see that and get the benefit from it. So, okay, that'll give us one of those attacking threats. Now, the problem is if we use Delina to copy this, it won't copy its current power, it'll copy its base power. So that's something to remember, but I think Veyron's a good idea. Preordain, we see Pixie Guide. Chaos Warp's not a bad idea, especially on as a spell that we can put onto one of our things as well. We see the big score there. So some people are looking kind of down the same road we are. Arenicus's Vile Duplication seems like an interesting idea. To copy any of our creatures. Priority boarding says whenever you roll a die, you may reveal the top card of the library. Do this only once each turn. Whenever you reveal a card with mana value less than the result, you may exile it. If you do, you may play it this turn. I'm less than the result. I think I'm okay. As much as I see the benefit there, it's definitely something. Okay, we'll consider it. And then Gitaxian Probe, just a 1 mana draw. Makes a ton of sense. There's some other draw spells like Serum Visions I'd rather play. Okay, Blasphemous Act. Archmage Emeritus is going to draw us cards. We see Brainstorm. We see the Stormcount Artist. We see Pongify. I like Serum Visions, so we'll add that. I like the Mana Geyser. That's going to help us bump up for a ton of mana. And then Twinning Staff doesn't seem like a bad idea because Myra copies those spells, right? Yeah, she copies the spell off the attraction. So Twinning Staff actually might make a ton of sense. All right, let's keep going. We see the Gutter Snipe. We see Feywild Trickster, which is going to really help because we're going to be rolling a ton of dice. So that's the plan. The plan is to roll a ton of dice. So I like the Trickster. Reckless Fireweaver seems like a good idea. I hope we're going to make enough treasure to make it really worth it. Let's really quick look through the attractions. Do any of them make artifacts or artifact tokens? So that creates a treasure. I know one creates a food. A bunch of flying. Concession stand makes a food. This makes a robot, which is an artifact. And the balloon isn't. Okay, so I think we have enough artifacts to make Reckless Fireweaver relevant. Tower End seems like a good idea to make tokens. See, I want to avoid these cards that just enter the battlefield and open an attraction because I think I would rather play a couple little spells and get the interactions that way and run up my cards that way rather than rely on this 3 mana common to open an attraction because for that 3 mana I could probably play 2 other spells. So yeah, I don't really see the benefit there. Lesser Static Field makes a ton of sense. Niv Mizzet makes a ton of sense. We can look at those and get them to fit in. Again, I'm good here. Same reason. I get that it's an Unfinity card, but it doesn't. We have so many other options. I love Jin Gitaxias, or as Mikey and I say, Jimmy G. I love him on the top end of this deck, protecting our spells and copying him. Ledger Shredder seems like not a bad idea. Wizards of Thay has Myriad, which seems kind of interesting. Let me think about this. So Delina goes off before at the start of combat, right? So Delina plus Wizards of Thay could be kind of interesting. We go really deep on the Wizards of Thay, and then we Myriad into an attack. That could be kind of interesting. Cyberdrive Awakener is a way to animate all of our artifacts. Which seems like not a bad idea if we have a ton of attractions. I'd rather just play Rise and Shine instead of this because it's a little bit cheaper. But I like where this is going. Shimmer Dragon, I like the idea of. We can tap the attractions to draw cards. That seems kind of cool. This plays into this Galazeth kind of style. Is Myra a wizard? She is not. So Harmonic Prodigy won't actually help me out there. I kind of wish it did. Dockside just seems really good, but I don't know that I'm as in on Dockside as I should be in this deck. I know that someone's else gonna be like, Millzy, what do you mean Dockside's such a broken card? And yes, Dockside it's only a good card, but I don't want to rely on my opponents having that many things to get things back. I'd rather just rely on the own things that I can do. I do love the idea of Balmor, though. We're going to probably be playing a ton of little spells and playing spells, and so Balmor is going to buff all of our creatures. It's going to buff our tokens and give them trample, which should help them get through. Love the idea of Leer and Gale. I just don't. I think we're going to have not a ton of creature slots left, and I think I need to keep them up for other things. This is interesting. Replication Specialist. Whenever a non-token artifact enters the battlefield under control, you may pay 1 in a blue. If you do, create a token that's a copy of it. Are any of the attractions legendary? They are not. Okay, well, that's something to consider. They are not legendary, which means we can copy them. So we need to keep that in the back of our head. When we get in a little bit later, we can look into some... we can look into some ways to do that. Interesting that this card shows up when it's not legal. So be careful. That acorn symbol means that it's not legal in the format. Of course, unless you and your play group rule 0 it and say it's okay, that's completely fine. But if you're going to go into a shop, just remember those acorn stamped cards are not legal. Let's move into some spells. I like Consider. I like Prismari Command. Again, just a little bit of bounce, just a little bit of loot, a little bit of treasure tokens, destroy some artifacts. This is a great spell because when we copy it, we can choose new targets. I'll have to confirm that on copying and choosing targets, but Mystical Tutor seems great. Another one of those cards that we don't mind. I love Storm's King Thunder. Storm King's Thunder is a way to end a game, make a big spell even bigger, or copy a spell. So love that. We'll put in a Fierce Guardianship. If you're a newer player and do not have a Fierce Guardianship, I'm sorry that this card is spiked as much as it has, but it's a great counterspell, and it's free if we control our commander. So I think it's worth having around. We see the Windfall. Shore Up, Simulacrum. Simulacrum seems kind of fun to, imprint on one of our attractions. Something like Risk Factor seems kind of fun to do often. Kind of like the idea of like Lazotep Plating or Myzium Skin. I wonder if we're gonna, do we play any like straight up copy spells like Galvanic Iteration? We can come back to that. We can think about it. Okay, so Ancestral Vision, if we put it on it and cast without paying its mana cost, we can actually cast it. So Ancestral Vision seems like a good idea. Replication Technique seems really good. We can make copies of the attractions. I love Seagate Restoration. It can just draw us a bunch of cards, but it's also a land. There's Rise and Shine. This is a card that's really important. Turns all of our, for 6 mana, turns all of our non-creature artifacts into 4/4s until end of turn. This... plus a Balmorn going off, or a bunch of other cards can just turn into a lot of really good. Time Stretch Shutout just got a reprint, or is going to be getting a reprint in Dominaria. I believe it is Dominaria United, or Dominaria Remastered, right? I think we just saw it today on stream. Time Warp, we want to play a couple extra turn spells. I know people get kind of dicey about extra turn spells, but they are really important, and they do really help blue decks. We're going to only play the extra turn spells that don't exile themselves. So Time Warp, Temporal Manipulation, Walk Daeons. Those are the ones that aren't going to do that. Remember, Myra lets us choose. So if we Faithless Looting, we can pitch one of them to the graveyard and then to get them out that way with it. So we don't have to just rely on casting them in order to get them. This makes tokens. Okay. So Wheel of Fate, one of those suspend cards that we can cast for free, but I'm not as interested in that one. Love the idea of Amanatu's Augury, but very expensive, and I don't know that we can get there. I think I'd be more apt to play something like Mnemonic Deluge, just because if we can actually resolve one, it says exile target instant or sorcery from your graveyard, copy that card 3 times. You may cast copies without playing their mana cost. This is one of those spells that can just end a game, depending on what you pick. So I like Mnemonic Deluge more than I like Amanatu's Augury. Shout out to my Emoti deck. If you're looking for a deck that can play these big blue spells and have a ton of fun, that's up on the channel. Go check that out. We see Quasi Duplicate. Okay, well, before we keep going here, let's add this giant stack of cards to our deck. So we've definitely gone through. We're picking around a bunch of cards. Of course, you know, we're definitely going to have to cut down, and that's okay. I think the good part about over adding sometimes when you're building is it allows you to kind of make sure that you have access to a bunch of different choices as opposed to just feeling like you're looped into only picking certain cards. The reason that the one reason why I like Arcane Bombardment, for example, in this deck is because it kind of acts as another Myra second ability, in that we're going to start a train basically of casting a bunch of spells for free every turn. And what I think is going to help with that is if we can get a Jessica's Will, or we can get a Brainstorm, or we can get an Expressive Iteration, or if we can get some of these powerful cheap spells underneath Arcane Bombardment. What it's actually going to do is just start a train. The best thing, of course, for Arcane Bombardment is if you can get an extra turn spell underneath it, because then literally all you have to do is cast one spell on your turn, and then you're going to go infinite from there. And I know that a lot of people get really salty when it comes to extra turn spells, and I completely understand, but at the end of the day, we are a blue-red spell slinging deck, and we need to be realistic about how we're going to end the game. And it's either going to be spell damage, going really wide and pumping them up, or doing both of those, you know, over the stake of a couple turns. So I know there's going to be one or two of you out there who are very offended by me wanting to play extra turn spells. I'm sorry if that's not the way that you want to play the game. But to me, I think that I see that as a necessary a necessary end game for this deck. We need a way eventually to push ourselves towards the end of the game, and I think the extra turn spells really do that. I gotta double check, but I'm pretty sure Delina makes the copies. I'm pretty sure she makes them non-legendary. Yeah, she does. So we could get into some pretty interesting things. If we copy Galazeth, for example, we would just continue to get treasures. If we copy something like Jenga taxes, we would just be able to literally counter almost anything. Now you lose the copies at the end of turn, and that's okay. What you really want to do with that is attack with something you know you're not going to lose, and then get all the copies and have all the copies just do your damage for you. The reason that I like Wizards of Thay is it has myriad, so when we make all those copies, we make the copies at the start of combat. Oh, no, we make them on attack. Okay, so Wizards of Thay looks a little bit worse than I thought it was. Okay. Well, maybe it's not as good. I think we have... I know that it lets us cast sorcery spells as though we could have flash, but I don't think it's as good now that I look at that. So we'll patch. We'll patch. We'll pass on that for now. All right, so we're just adding the rest of our mound of spells here. Again, we're gonna very much cut these down. We're gonna have to do more. We're gonna have to be a little bit more. What's the word I'm looking for? We're gonna have to be a little bit more selective, of course, on what spells we play. But I am intrigued to see how some of these work. Command performance seems like really good in the early game, for example, whereas it seems not as good in the late game. All right, so let's see. We got Wand of Wonder. Inspiring Statuary lets all of our artifacts tap for that. So that's kind of a second copy of Galazeth, which seems really important. Okay, so Mirrorworks is kind of doing that same thing that one creature did. It allows us to pay to copy that artifact. This seems really interesting. Strength Testing Hammer. Whenever a creature attacks, roll 6-sided die. That creature gets +X/+1 until the turn where X is the result. Then if it had the greatest power or is tied for the greatest power, draw a card. Clown card was the battlefield. Rolled X 6-sided dice. For each odd result, create a 1/1 clown. For each even result, put a token on it. It has crew 2. Interesting. We don't really want to play Gerard's Hourglass Pendant because we want to take the extra turns, or at least that's my goal. Sculpting Steel seems like it could be interesting to come down and copy something. Nettlecyst seems pretty good as a way to end the game. That comes down and the creature gets a counter on it for each of the artifacts. Okay, this is where I expect to get a little bit more value. We see Storm the Vault. We see the Puzzle Ward. Metallurgic Summonings is not something I thought about, especially since they're artifacts, so that makes a lot more sense. Sorcerer's Class, it's level 2, does the same thing. Creatures we control, so our tokens can tap to cast spells. Motion Sickness, and when we visit attraction, it can move around. I don't really see it as much. Exchange of Words. Choose target creatures for as long as they remain on the battlefield. Exchange the text boxes of those creatures. It seems kind of interesting. Training Grounds. Activate abilities. Creature control costs 2 less to activate. So Gear per Aether Grid would just allow us to tap those attractions to deal damage. Okay. Artificer Class seems kind of interesting. When you get it up, allows you to get that artifact, and at the beginning of the end step, you create an artifact. That's a copy of target artifact you control, which seems like it's exactly up the lane of what we want. We see the Bombardment. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, control from anywhere, or you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, create a 3/3. The only problem with the second side is we're not necessarily always casting the copies. I don't think Myra says we cast the copy. Oh, it says we cast the copy. Then that actually may be a lot better than I first read it. I like the idea of Search of Iskanta. It can kind of get us through our things. I also really do like Mirror Maid because it can copy any other enchantment, or it can copy one of the attractions. So that seems really good. I guess maybe Sculpting Steel is probably something we should look at as well, because again, it can come in and copy an attraction. I do love Shark Typhoon as well, but it seems like it might be a little expensive, but we'll throw it in there as a maybe. And then Heuristic Studies seems like a no-brainer. Saheeli the Gifted, yep, since we're going to go down this artifact route, let's consider it. And what does Mordenkainen say? Draw 2 cards, put a card from your hand on the bottom. Create a dog that says twice the number of cards in your hand. Okay, I don't see as much of the benefit in Mordenkainen, but let's add these guys in here. How are we doing? We're doing good on time. I love it. Well, when we don't have really complicated play lines, it's easy to have some fun. And I really would love, if you're watching through this far, guys, I would love to hear some feedback. Do you guys like this format? Do you like brewing decks with me? Are there any commanders you guys want to see? If so, throw them down in the comments. Like I said, I have 1 or 2 more coming from 40K. And I've got probably that's all from and this will probably be all from Infinity. As much as I appreciate Infinity, again, this would be the only thing I'm willing to mess around with. And like I said, this is something that I've kind of wanted to try on its own, and I also want to try it in as a support in Galazeth. So I'm really interested to see which. I think Shark definitely being too expensive. Then let's add Saheeli. Gifted. I think what was I going to say? I'm interested to see which way feels better. Does Galazeth feel like a better support in something like this, or Galazeth, which is a commander that's very funly broken on its own? I don't expect it to be difficult. I like the Inventor Sphere. I like Otawara. I think we want to play our artifact lands since we care so much about artifacts. I don't know about Darksteel Citadel. If you have an Ancient Tomb, I would play it. It just helps us get that mana quickly. Academy Ruins seems good if any of things get put back. Now, I'm not sure how Academy Ruins works with it. I'm still not entirely sure on how the attraction deck works. Like whether you can put things back into the attraction deck from like the attraction graveyard. I'm not entirely sure how that works, guys. So I got to figure that out as well because I'm honestly not very sure. Where I'm going to probably lose some people is playing like a Mox Opal and Mana Crypt. A lot of people don't really like those two, but I think they're going to help us a lot with getting our mana ramped up. The fun part about this is it's also going to teach me a bunch of lessons to take into my Galazeth deck. You know, Galazeth doesn't care as much about the does of course not care as much about the attractions, and that's okay. I just see the benefit of the attractions because they're artifacts that you can tap for mana, right? And so that was where that idea originally came from for me, was, oh, wait a second, we have a basic benefit here. And so I'm kind of intrigued to see how often we can actually find Galazeth. I mean, it's more than possible that we're not going to find Galazeth all that often in this deck. Whereas, you know, in a true Galazeth list, I can guarantee myself Galazeth, right? So I think that's why Inspiring Statuary and Sorcerer class come in to be a little more important, is because, well, Sorcery class lets our tokens tap either way, or creatures tap anyway. But Inspiring Vantage allows our artifacts to tap for one, which will just end up helping us along the way. We're at 132. Let's look through the rest of these lands. Again, I only went so deep on blue-green lands, or blue-red lands, because to be honest, I couldn't remember any of the names off the top of my head. So I know I didn't add that. I know I didn't add Command Tower. I know I didn't add the center. I added that. Cascade Bluff seems great. Field of Passage seems good. Frostball Snarl seems good. We're going to play enough basics anyway. I like the idea of Reflecting Pool. Fire Islet's a good one, but I'd rather just play Shivan Reef instead. Plaza Hero seems kind of fun. It's a card that I've had fun playing in a bunch of my decks, so I think we're going to give it a shot here. I don't think we'll need Spire of Industry. If we were getting into 3 colors, we would definitely need it. But I don't think we need as many of these dual lands as I think we do. I think we can get away with more basics. We'll just want to look at our color spread, right, to determine when it comes time for you to determine how many basic lands you should put in a deck. Most of your deck building resources will give you a breakdown of what the percentages of different color symbols on all of your cards. So what you should do is you should take a good look at what the spread is. If you favor towards one color or another, I would advise you. I would actually advise you. You know, you stagger the amount of basics to reflect that way. I don't want to do that yet because, like, for example, if I scroll down here, it's saying that I'm. What does it tell me? So I'm more blue than red. I have 53 red pips and 74 blue pips. But I know that's going to change once I make my cut. So I don't want to do that just yet. I will know that these will come down, right? Because we added a ton. So let's pull them down to like 7 a piece. And then what we can do is we can continue to cut some of them down from there, since we're playing a lot of these other lands. Okay, guys, we're at 128, which honestly isn't too bad. I think we've definitely had opportunities where we were a whole lot worse off on the amount of if you guys have watched the Abaddon episode, man, I put myself through the ringer trying to cut that deck down. All right, so I need to remember not to put cards on the sideboard because this is where I had to put all of my attractions. So what we'll probably do is, do we have a maybe board? We have a maybe board. Okay, so we're going to put the cards we don't want on the maybe board. And then just like every one of my other Millzy Brews episodes, the deck list for this is going to be down in the description. Like I said, at the end of the video, you'll see me cut the maybe board down to about 10 or 11 cards. And the deck as it sits will be always in this architect for you to use. if I do anything with myself with this deck personally, I always pull it off here. I want to leave all of these decks intact so that you can see them, you can come over and copy them, and you can do whatever you'd like with them. So let's go through the sorceries. Mass manipulation might have to come out for now. It seems like it's kind of expensive. I want to try to keep a lot of these cards that I can easily copy. Curse of the Swine might come out for now. I want to keep Crackle with Power. I want to keep, maybe since we're playing Ancestral Visions, maybe we can cut down on the Serum Visions, for example. We already have a lot of other draw. I kind of like the Faithless Looting here because we can exile them from the graveyard, which means we can load them up with the Faithless Looting. I'm going to cut this Vile Duplication for now. Again, the cool part about having a maybe board is it allows you to test cards, think about cards while you're testing your deck, and always come back if you realize that you cut something you didn't want to cut. I think with our current theme, both of the Saheelis do me a little bit better than Rawl, and I think we're going to end up coming into some problems anyway with numbers, so I'm going to cut that Rawl for now. Let's go to the instance. I'm going to cut Will's Reversal for now and the Gale's Redirection. We can come back to those two. I need to read them more, and I think I want to keep my spells a little bit lower to the ground. So we want to keep the Storm King's Thunder. This is a card that can definitely push over the edge. It's X triple red. Whenever you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, doesn't say from where, copy that spell X times. You may choose new targets for the copy. What I like about this is with Myra, if one of our attractions has one of our extra turn spells on it, when this visit trigger goes on the stack, we could respond with Storm King's Thunder and then do it in response, and then that would let us copy it as many times as we want, or, we can do it plenty of different ways. So I really like that. I think I'm going to cut Consider for now. Again, we have that problem of probably going to end up having too many 1 mana draw spells. I like keeping Pongify and Rapid Hybrid just because those removal spells will probably end up being pretty necessary. Part of me wants to cut either Windfall or Big Score, just because, again, we're going to have a ton of draw, and I feel like we're going to run out of good. We're going to have just too many draw, too many cooks in the kitchens on the draw. I think 35 lands is probably good on that. So that brings it down to 117. Let's go through the enchantments. I like Thousand Year Storm. Like Lost to the Damned, but it may end up being kind of the weakest link here. So let's cut it for now. Storm the Vault. Whenever we deal damage, we get a treasure, and then it flips over and becomes a Tolarian Academy, where we can tap for a blue for each artifact we control, which is really good. Sorcerer class, Ristic Study, Rain of Riches, Priority Boarding. I still think I don't love, but it's something that I probably am just going to be wrong on. I think I'm going to cut Maddening Hex, as much as I like the idea of it, and it's going to roll us dice. There's better things. I like the summonings. See, the Puzzle Ward to me is kind of an interesting card because it looks really good, and it's a way for us to roll dice, but it almost seems like there's better things. I like the classes, and I like Arcane Bombardment. Okay, so let's go through the artifacts. All of everything inside of me wants to run the Wizard Spellbook, but I feel like it's just going to end up being too expensive, so we're going to cut it for now. I like Wand of Wonder, like the Puzzle Box. Now that we know that our command are copies, we want the Twinning Stack for sure. Sculpting Steel, the Amulet, the Opal. We can cut the Component Pouch for sure. Okay, down to 111. Let's go through the creatures, and then we'll take another snapshot and see where we're at. Okay, so we definitely want, if we want to go into this creature, if we want the Sorcerer class to work, we have to go to the creature tokens. But if we get through this and decide that the creature tokens aren't the way we want to go, even though these both create creature tokens, maybe that means we pull the Sorcerer class out. Copper Dragon just seems way too expensive. I really want to run this. Everything inside me wants to run this. And the reason is because if Delina copies Copper Dragon and it hits, we're going to win a game. I just have a gut feeling that if we can get that many Copper Dragons to hit a player, we're going to win a game. And that's why I want to keep it so bad. And I think I just talked myself into keeping it. This is the problem when you get down this low. Someone's going to yell at me. I think I'm going to cut Emeritus. I don't think we're going to have a problem drawing cards with how much cheap draw we have. I kind of also want to cut Faraday. Whenever you roll one of our dice, gains flying in minutes to a turn. If any of those results turn higher, draw a card. At least cut it for now. I think we're going to have so many other creature payoffs that we need to pay attention to. I like the field since we're going to be playing so many spells. And Arcane Compartment lets us cast 2. That makes us tokens. That makes us treasure. That deals damage. We want to keep that. Jimmy G just seems really good. Magnus the Red might look a little out of place now, but we'll think about pulling it back in. Monitor seems great. Nivmiz is just a classic. Just seems like a classic red-blue card. And the reason I kind of want to keep it in here is it says whenever someone casts into the source spell, we draw a card. Delina says we get it until the end of combat. If we were to play a spell in the middle of combat, we could just set off a giant chain of damage, which seems kind of interesting. We'll leave Prune in there for now. Pixie Guide for sure. Poppet Stitcher for sure, just because it gives us all those tokens. Fireweir seem like it's going to be good. We're going to have all these things coming in. Shimmer Dragon seems good. I kind of think I talked myself out of Smoldering Egg. We have other... I think I like Electric Static Field over the Smothering Egg. Artist, yes. Tower End, yes. The Squirrel Whacker. Squirrel Whacker, I don't see the benefit of it. I think I've talked myself out of Veyron as well. I think we have just other things we care about. All right, we're down to 105. Pyromancer. Okay, now this is where cuts get hard because we want to keep our good maybe replication technique. The only good thing about replication technique is if we can get it onto an attraction, it just becomes really good. But we will cut that for now. Mana Geyser. See, those give us so much good mana. We want to keep the mana. I like those two. I like the amount of lands. I really don't want to go down a land, but I guess we could go down a land. Let's go down the Temple of Epiphany. Let's go down a land. Don't know that I want to, but let's do it. Do we need the Unexpected Windfall? Well, if we want to go into the treasures, I think we do want it because we want to be able to get it. Maybe we go down one of the Pongify or a Rapid Hybrid, but I kind of like having the removal kind of ready to go. We don't want to discount that. Artificer class just seems really good. If we get it up to level 3, we're copying. But at the same time, are we going to be in the situation where we're not going to be able to do it cheaper otherwise? Maybe. This is just the tough. I mean, I hate to be a broken record here, but it's just this is the toughest part of deck building is cutting down to 100. And I think that what I want to preach here when I say cutting down to 100 is your first 100 is never going to be perfect. The first time you cut your deck down to 100, you're going to have this mess, this pile of mess. And then you're going to have to take it and try it out and see, does the deck actually do what I want it to do? Or is it just a pile of mess? And if you realize that it's a pile of mess that has gaps in it, then you can use... That's why I always recommend keeping your maybe board around or keeping an idea of cards you might want to add back in so that you can determine, hey, am I on the right track here? I think I like Poppet Stitcher, but maybe it's something that comes out for the sake of other cards. Now we're down to 101. We are almost there, friends. We are almost there. I love Storm the Vault. Man, I love so many cards in this deck. This is going to get really tough. We have the three extra turn spells. Demonic Deluge just seems really good. If we can put it on literally anything, if we can get it onto an attraction somehow, it would just be great. But maybe it's too expensive. Let's do that. All right, friends, we're down to 100 cards. We're down to 100 cards. Man, that was tough. But we got there. We got spell slinging. We got dice rolling. We got a little bit of everything. Let's go through our maybe board. And what I want to do is get this down to, like for the rest of our decks, I want to get this down to between 10 and 12 cards that we're going to look at while we test. I think Spellbook's going to be too expensive. Squirrel Whacker. We'll cut the Temple of Epiphany. Cut the Egg. Cut the Boarding. Cut the Puzzle Board. We'll cut Mass Manip. We'll cut Curse of Swine. We'll cut Consider. Again, these are all cards that we just have other copies of. We'll cut the Pouch. Cut the Maddening Hex. I think we can cut Arena Kisses. Okay, so we got it down to 13, and I think I'll cut Raw. So it's down to 12. That's good. So these will be our 12 cards to kind of consider as we go. So the first thing I'm going to do after this video, after we end this video, and I've shipped my list. We're at 100, and it's going to be available for you guys when this goes live, including that sideboard of attraction cards that we need to print out. Is I'm going to come over to these, and I'm going to kind of look at what else people are doing. Maybe I missed any other sub strategies. I still recommend you do this even when you build your own decks. Go look at what other people are putting in their decks, because for sure I'm going to miss something. And that's okay. No one's a perfect deck builder. Even I'm not a perfect deck builder. I do expect this deck to do fairly well. The argument could be made Jimmy G could come out for another spell. There's plenty of ways this deck could change. But I think this is something... I don't expect every deck that I build to be something I want to play, but I think this seems kind of interesting. And so I'm excited to try this deck out. Other than that, guys, that's all. Myra the Magnificent. We built it. Attractions. I am really excited. My plan is to probably proxy this up and proxy Galazeth up and kind of play them at the same time and see which I like more. I think the answer ended up being Galazeth. The deck's just built a lot better to cast those spells and get the treasure and use the treasure to cast more spells. Maybe after I'm testing, I do just more testing with it. Maybe I'll do a video on kind of what I've found with Galazeth. And I'm trying to do more videos going in the future on the test decks that I have and what I'm finding success with. But other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching. We built Myra. Link to the deck's going to be down in the description. Also down in the description, code HOMETOWN. Go over to rogueenergy.com. Powdered energy drink. It's something I use every morning. It's something I really like, and I've turned Mikey on to. He's used some other products in the past. I also use a couple of different products, but no sugar, some vitamins. I just use it instead of coffee or the old energy drinks I used to drink while I was working retail, and it just keeps you going. And it just ends up being good. Our pips ended up being about even. Keeps you going in the morning, and I like it because after I drink it down and fill it up some water, it just becomes flavored water. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you next time.